Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second session on um, teaching effectively online with My.Seneca. I know some of you are just joining us, and we'll have some others trickle in the next little while. Just wanted to let you know that we have the chat open. Could we please, at this stage, leave the chat for questions? There's quite a few of us in the session, and we have some co-moderators monitoring the chat area, and we'll be flagging the questions. We'll have ample opportunity throughout the session to pause and have a Q&A session on certain topics. If you're not familiar with the chat, you can access it at the bottom right of your screen. You'll see a purple icon there with chevrons. Click those, and if you click the bubble, you'll be able to access the chat. So welcome. Thanks for taking some time out of your evening to join us. And the title of our session is Teaching Effectively Online Using My.Seneca. Our moderators today are myself, Kevin Pitts, along with Alex Stewart. We're from Teaching and Learning, and Andres Quintero, and I believe Cheryl is coming to join us from ITS as well to help with the moderation. So thank you to Alex, Andres, and Cheryl for helping out this evening. So what we want to do today is we want to couch this session in some general considerations and frameworks around teaching and learning. So we're going to start with that. It won't take us very long, but just some things to think about as you're planning your online courses and as you're making some teaching decisions around your online courses. After that, we'll get right into the practical aspect. We'll do some demonstrations of some communication tools with things that can help you with communication with students online, tools for sharing content with students online, and tools for assessing students online. A couple of things from our session this afternoon is that a lot of people were interested in Blackboard Collaborate and how it functions. A lot of people are interested in assessments, how to set up tests and assignments. We will get to those parts. But we do have a little bit of an agenda to kind of so it flows properly. But keep patient, and we will get to those sessions. It did take about 2 and a bit hours this afternoon, so I'm imagining we'll probably be about the same time frame for our session this evening as well. So as I mentioned, relax, get comfortable, grab your favorite beverage, and we'll get rolling along. Okay, so let's get started. First is we're going to do a quick poll. We want to find out a little bit about yourselves in terms of your experience with My.Seneca. Alex, could you launch the poll for us? So our question to start off is, how would you rate your proficiency or skill level at using My.Seneca? We've got a rating scale everywhere from extremely proficient 1 all the way down to very beginning of using My.Seneca. Go ahead and answer the poll. I'll give you a couple of seconds to go ahead and do that. Just a couple more responses to come in. So if you're not familiar with the poll option in Blackboard Collaborate or some other web conferencing tools, it is a way to engage the audience and your students if you're using it with your students, just to get a quick snapshot of how everybody's feeling and important information that you can use during your session. So what you would do is just click one of the options there. Just a couple more people left to respond. I'll give you 10 more seconds, 15 more seconds to go ahead and give us a response, and then we'll reveal the results. Okay, there we go. One more second or two. If you haven't responded yet, go ahead and click one of the options. And Alex, when you're ready, could you reveal the results to the poll? So here we go. So we've got a mix around our experience with My.Seneca. We have some that are very proficient, some that have just starting out, and a big bunch of us in the middle that are somewhat proficient and skilled. Good, so that gives us a good mix of people that are joining the session today. So our session is going to look at using the tools. We're going to keep it simple. in terms of all the tools that we have in our instance of My.Seneca here and how we can use them for effective online teaching. So let me clear the poll and we'll get started with our first section, which is to deal with some teaching and learning frameworks. As I mentioned earlier, we do want to bring in some, I wouldn't call it theory, but it is theory. It's just some guidance for us in how we make our decisions around what we do in the online environment. And this actually applies to any teaching and learning environment. But let's take a look at them as we go along. And you may have heard of these before. And if not, we've got a reference here that you can go and find out some more information. So the first is universal design for learning. And it's all about multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression. And the key here is that we really want to look at flexibility and adaptability. How can we create the environment for students to learn, to reach those learning outcomes in the best possible way for all learners? That's what universal design for learning is all about. So keeping that in the back of your mind. And as we make the decisions and I demonstrate some of the options here, I'm going to come back to these frameworks and say, this is why we're doing it this way, or this is my thinking as I did it this way. Another one that you may or may not have heard of is the community of inquiry framework. And this is known as the presences, if anybody's familiar with distance learning or online learning. And really what it boils down to is critical is the teaching presence. Just like it is in the classroom, teaching presence is so important for you to be there, to facilitate the sessions. And it is particularly important online. Social presence, creating a community of learners. What do we do that allows students to come in and interact with one another, with yourself, and creating that kind of learning community. And of course, cognitive presence. We want students to engage with relevant content that meets their needs, meets their learning goals. So thinking about those three things, and you might notice a theme as we go along. It seems everything in education that's worth it comes in threes, like many other things. So we're dealing with all these things have 3 items to them. Next is very closely related is interaction. So as you're building your course, how are you incorporating things like student-to-teacher interaction, student-to-student interaction, and student-to-content interaction? They follows very closely with that teacher presence, social presence, cognitive presence area. So think about those kinds of things as you're building the options in your courses. The other thing is the notion of meta-literacy, and we'll call these the 3 main literacies. There's many others. I know we have, Seneca has core literacies. There's 10 core literacies, and it's a good idea to take a look at those in terms of additional literacies. But basically, we want to provide opportunities for students to, for oral literacy, that's listening and speaking, for traditional literacy, reading and writing, and for digital literacy, how do they consume and produce digital stuff? So as we build assignments, activities, anything in our course, are the students listening and speaking? Are they reading and writing? And are they consuming and producing digital stuff? It doesn't have to be all the time. It just means, have you thought about all of these different ways of interaction and engagement? And then, of course, teaching modality. When we're looking at asynchronous activity or synchronous activity or a mixture of the two. So asynchronous means not at the same time. So you can design a perfectly viable, excellent online course that doesn't have any synchronous component, where you're just providing the environment, providing the guidance, interacting in an asynchronous manner, which means not at the same time. You could also then decide, well, I want to put some synchronous components in there, such as what we're doing right now through a Collaborate or a web conferencing system. So you might look at, maybe I'll do online office hours, or maybe I will have a class or a lecture every so often. But you have to think about your learners. Are they able to join these sessions without undue hardship? Think about universal design. Is there another way that I could do it other than this? And so you're looking at the mixture of how to do those different things. And we'll talk about each of these as we get into the practical part of it. The other thing I just want to point out on this one too is your class online is, you have to think in terms of blocks of sessions. So when we think about a regular classroom where we're going, say, 3 hours on a Monday night for our class every week, it's a regular thing. An online environment, if we're doing asynchronous, it could be any time throughout that week of that week 1 or week 2, the students could then be engaging with the content. So how do we have ready those activities for the week and wherever students want to come in and join the sessions? Okay, So let's get started. So we're going to begin with the practical part. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you a course, an organization in My.Seneca, and we're going to start from scratch as if it's a blank shell that we get at the beginning of the semester. And then how do we populate it? How do we add materials to it so they adhere to these kind of frameworks and they create a solid environment. There's nothing fancy in here, realistically, in terms of multimedia, etc. It's just a basic using the tools that we have available to us to create an engaging learning environment. All right, so what am I going to start off with? So there's 3 sections. The first is the communication tools. After this, we'll have an opportunity to pause and have some questions that you have. Then we'll go into content. How do we put content in and share content? Another round of questions, and then at the end we'll do assessment, and then again show you how to do a couple of assessment things, and then have a round of question and answer. Okay, so let's look at communication tools. I want to talk about announcements. I want to talk about email. I want to talk about discussion boards, and I want to talk about web conferencing tools. The first 3 of these are asynchronous tools, creating an environment that, for asynchronous parts of your course. The last one, web conferencing, is a synchronous tool. So let's get started with that. I am going to share my screen. Give me 1 second so it'll pop up and hopefully everything will work fine. I'm going to ask you if we are able to see my screen. Okay, I'm just going to allow that, and I'm going to pop over to my screen. Okay, does everybody see my screen? Okay, it looks like we're into the, I'm going to stop that for a second because it looks like the shared app, it was mirroring experience there. Okay, no problem. Let me go and do this again. Sorry, picked the wrong thing to share. Okay, 1 second. Okay, there we go. Does everybody see my announcements page on my My.Seneca course shell? Okay, I've got a couple of you saying that. That's okay. You don't need to continue saying that's fine. I can see it here. So let's get started with those. Okay. Now I know one of the things you might not be able to see is my mouse pointer. I will try to describe where my mouse pointer is going as we're going along. So first off, announcements. And again, I won't probably spend a lot of time on some of these because you know this a lot already, but I just want to point out why we do announcements, things to include in an announcement, that kind of thing, as to adhere to the frameworks. So the first thing with a blank shell, you'll notice that when students enter, they start at the announcements page and it is a blank screen. So why are announcements important? Well, practically, you want to have something there for students to look at when they enter the course in My.Seneca. And it is part of our Seneca minimum requirements is to have a welcome announcement at least. But announcements do another thing. They provide a way as a regular check-in. Remember I talked about a week-to-week kind of chunking of content throughout the semester. So this is a way for you to do a check-in every week with your students. And what I do is I do a beginning of the week weekly announcement that lists what the students are expected to do, where they can go and do those things online, and why they're doing it and how they're going to be doing it. So let's go and create our first announcement. So I'm just going to turn edit mode on. Right now it's off, and if I toggle to the very top, I can click on that to turn edit mode on. When I do that, I become the Uber user of my course, and I can go and see things like create announcement button. I think we've all seen this before for many of you. So let's go and create an announcement, and I'll just point out a couple of things here. How Blackboard works is that whenever you want to add or input something or initiate a task, you're given a web form, you fill out the web form, and you click submit at the bottom here. So let me start with this one. Maybe the announcement is a welcome announcement, or it could be the week 5 announcement, it could be any announcement. I'll just give it a name. I have to give it a name because anything with an orange asterisk indicates you have to fill that in. So here's my message, okay? So I want to say, and I want to be invitational in my language. So my language is saying, welcome everybody, and glad you're here. Welcome, glad you're here. Then I can get into the specifics. So I'm just not going to write the entire announcement. I'm just going to say, list out what you want the students to do, okay? So expectations, what are they supposed to do, okay? When are they supposed to do it, okay? Perhaps something like, you could include why, obviously that's good. And then of course, how are they supposed to do it? Are they supposed to post something in the discussion board? Are they supposed to submit an assignment? What's due this week, perhaps? Okay, those kinds of things. When's the class? Is there going to be a guest speaker? If you do have office hours, when are those going to be this week? Those kinds of things. So I'm not going to fill out that message for now. I'm just going to give you some hints as to what to include. Coming down to the options, duration. Do you want it date restricted or not? What I find in my courses is that I don't ever date restrict announcements. The reason being is at the end of the semester, you get a week-to-week review almost that shows you what was taking place during the semester. Students can use that for studying purpose to kind of organize how they're going to study for the final task, project, exam, whatever. I do also want to send a copy of this announcement immediately to people in the class. This is one area in Blackboard where you can push content to students. And so sending that weekly announcement at the beginning as a check-in, a regular check-in. Here you go, everybody. You're going to get it in your email. Here's what's happening in our class. And I'm just going to go ahead and submit that. And then it appears on the screen. And so when students come in to look at the course, it's there and they know what to do from there. Okay, so that's why we do announcements. Okay, it's a weekly check-in. Here's to those asynchronous decisions we're making about students. It's starting our teacher presence in there to say, here I am. If you're teaching online or anywhere, you want to be first and most often in at the beginning, so students get the sense of what the expectations are. You're there, you're guiding the learning, etc. Okay, so that takes care of announcements. What's another asynchronous tool that we can do to help with communication, help with social presence, getting everybody engaged? Also helping, in terms of consuming digital content. Well, one area is to add email. So right now, if I look at my menu over on the left, and I think you can see me scrolling through my menu, even though if you can't see my cursor, I don't have an email area there. I do have it under tools, but I want to make it easy for students to get access to these tools and use them for social purposes or communication or for whatever reason they might want to in our environment that we're creating. So what I'm going to do, I've turned edit mode on, and when I do that, I have some extra options at the very top of my menu. And when I mouse over the plus sign at the very top left, I have access to add items to my menu. I'm going to add a tool link. So these types of tools, email, discussion board, are all tools, and I'm going to give it a name. It's a little mini web form. You'll see that the asterisk is there, so you have to give it a name at least. The type of tool is important. I have to choose from the list the tool that kind of matches my name. It doesn't have to be an exact match, okay? I could have called this send email, as long as it is the tool that represents email. So here I'm going to make it available to users by selecting that and submitting. Now at the bottom, I see everything that you add to the menu is added at the bottom. If I scroll to the left, it changes to a compass point navigation, and I can move it anywhere I want in my menu. I tend to leave communication items together. I usually put them at the very top because I think communication, especially at the beginning, is critical. So we want to make sure people have a quick access to those communication tools. Okay. By the way, I'm just going to like a note out to Alex and Andres. Because I'm sharing, I can't actually see what's happening in the chat. So if there's any major concerns about the microphone or not hearing or wanting me to pause for a second, just let me know and chime in at any time. Okay, so sending email, why do we want to put that up there? Well, again, it's to initiate the sense of community. It's an asynchronous mode of communication. It involves student-to-student interaction as well as student-to-teacher interaction. So if I click the email link, what are the options that students and myself would have? I can email all the users in the class. So maybe I had an announcement, but something came up during the week. Oh, I forgot to mention we've got a guest speaker. Email all the users. Hey, everybody, guest speaker coming tomorrow night. We're going to be using Blackboard Collaborate and seeing everybody at 7 p.m. Or you can come down here and email single select users. So of the list of users, I might just want to email myself, my Kevin Pitts preview user, or Andres or Alex, and I want to select those and just email Alex and ask him a question about, hey Alex, I noticed that you're late with assignment part 3. Can we talk about it? Is there something I can do to help you with that? Those types of things. I'm not going to send the email right now, but you would just go in and enter the subject in here, whatever it is. You would enter your message just like you would a regular email. You can attach files to the email like so, and you can then submit that email. And so students would have access to this as well. So if they want to contact their peers about something, they can certainly do so through the send email. Okay, so we've started with communication tools. We've got announcements, we've got email. Now what I want to do is maybe start to look at engaging students in student-to-student contact in more kind of specific way. Let's engage with the content, ask some guiding questions around content that will help us reach the learning outcomes of the course. And one of the ways we can do that is via a discussion board. So we can create that kind of asynchronous online classroom through the discussion board. How do we do that? We go to our menu. I notice I don't have discussion board listed there. So let me add that tool to the menu as well. So I go back up, again, edit mode on, plus sign. I'm going to add another tool link to my course. I'm going to call it the discussion board. And then I'm going to make sure that the type of tool matches my description. Well, there is the discussion board tool listed there, so I can click it. I'll make it available to users, and I'll submit. And it appears at the bottom of the screen. So again, for my purposes, I want to bring it up with the other communication tools. And here's a little tip as well. If you want to separate the different parts of your menu, there's also this neat little thing in the plus area called a divider. So I can click the divider, which gives me a line, and I can drag that up, and there we go. I've kind of isolated my communication tools at the top, separated from the rest of the components, just so this, students get to know that these are the communication tools. Let me now go and create something for students to discuss. And how do I do that in the online environment? Well, let's get into the tool. So I'm going to click discussion board. And this is, I've already started one already. Discussion board is a two-step process. So the first step is that you want to create the container for discussion, okay? And then once you've created that, you want to then start the conversation. So the containers are called forums. So with edit mode on, I have this option here to create a forum. So I'm going to go ahead and click that to create the forum. And again, I get a web form. I fill out the web form and set some options. So maybe this is, week 1, and we're talking about Darwin and influence on science. Okay, something like that. This is our week 1 discussion. Naming is very important. Don't just call it week 1. Indicate what it is that week 1 is all about, okay? And this comes especially important for users that might have accommodations or need to use screen readers, etc. So that from a universal design for learning perspective, the context, if they're pulling out links, pulling out certain parts of a course, they need to know what week 1 meant. And this is, so put the context with generic information like week 1. Okay. I don't have to give description. One of the hints here is don't put more information than is absolutely necessary for students in the online environment, but put the information that's required. You want to be explicit, but not redundant. So I think the title explains it pretty well, so I'm not going to put in a description. I will, in my thread, describe a little bit more of what I want students to do. Let's take a look at the options here. I want to make it available, absolutely. You can set date parameters around when it will be available and when it will close. I tend not to do that. Again, it's personal preference from your own teaching style, but I tend not to because I want students to go back. I want them to go and revisit other discussions at any other point that they might feel comfortable doing that. So I just always leave it open. Okay. So we've got some forum settings now. You can grade this if you want to set this option here to include in the grade how many points. Again, if you're doing assessment, and we'll talk about assessment later on, this is one way that you might want to do formative assessment, ongoing assessment, and check how students are learning. You can grade the discussion board requirements. So you could say you got to post once a week, you got to reply to others, and you'll get grades for that. Okay. So I'm not going to do that for this one, or maybe I will. We'll see. Maybe I'll give them 5 points for this particular discussion as they go through. I could add a rubric for that if I have a rubric. I do recommend rubrics if you haven't used them before. We won't have time today to look at rubrics, but they are certainly a great option for saving time and helping students with feedback in an online environment and any environment, not just online. Now, some of the editing options that we can do for settings. So right now, I'm not allowing anonymous posts. Do I want to allow the author to delete their own posts? Well, if I'm grading it, probably not. But maybe I do want to allow the author to edit their own posts because they might have made a mistake. They might have said something perhaps inappropriate when they're posting for the first time, and they want to go back and have a second chance and correct it. And you can gently nudge students to as you read it and are engaged in the forums. So I'll leave that, and then I'll submit this container, our forum. So we have a week 1 forum. Another forum that I did for the afternoon group is this question and answers forum. This is always a great idea. Put up an open forum for students to answer or ask questions about the course in general, and then you can go in and answer them, and they're there for everybody in the course to see. It's almost like a frequently asked questions guide. The other thing too is I like to say to students, go ahead and answer some questions if you know it. Let's help each other out as we go through the experience together, our learning journey together. Okay, so I've got the forum created. I don't have any posts in there, obviously. There's nothing really to do yet until you actually do the second part of the discussion. So let's click on the forum and then start the conversation. So that is done by creating a thread. So over on the left-hand side, I've got create thread. I click on it, and then I can start my conversation, okay? Darwin and science, okay? Something like that. Maybe something more creative. You'll have some time to think about what you want to say, okay? So maybe I say Darwin had many contributions. Well, you know what I would do, to be absolutely honest with you, I always start it with hi everyone, okay? I want to get the invitational language, get them settled in so that we can start this process. And I can start with Darwin had, and I can give them a stem or of a kind of a feeder, a kind of a teaser to get them going. What are your thoughts? Okay, something like that. What are your thoughts? And you might want to be a little bit more specific about what you want, okay? And I can do something like this. I'm just going to go and pop out something I do quite often here. Okay, I can say if you have a question about anything in this thread, okay, go ahead and post it. If you have an answer, post it here too. Let's help each other out. So that may or may not be appropriate directly in here, but I want to get that vibe. So you're saying, you know, if you have a question about Darwin's contributions, okay, post it here or reply and answer it, and away we go in terms of what we're going to be talking about. So I've got my message in there. Notice too that I have things I could add. There's a number of icons. I could attach a file. I can also attach a file down here, but I could also attach a file in the actual message. I can insert an image. Maybe you want to have a picture in there. Careful about images. Make sure that they are copyright clearance. There's no images that you're using that are not copyright protected. Great sources for images. I'll just write them in here for you. Okay, let me just take that out for a second. I'll just write them in here. Pixabay.com, I believe, and Unsplash. And I'll have Alex or Andres to post those into the chat area. Those are great places to go and search for royalty-free images that you can download and insert into your descriptions there and conversations. Okay, I'm ready to go. I'll submit, and away you go. So here we go. We've got the Darwin and science thread. Now, I've started, so let me go and recap. I've set up the communication tools for asynchronous communication. I'm going to do weekly announcements. I've put in the email so students can email each other and me. I've set up the discussion board where they can communicate with each other online and everybody can see the conversation, just like they might have a conversation in class. One of the things you do want to do at this stage is check it to make sure that the student is seeing exactly what you want them to see. Make sure it works. And we can do that through what's called the preview, student preview mode. And it's right up here at the top. You'll see, I think you can see the overlay. It says enter student preview mode. That's the icon. It looks like a green dot with arrows. If I click that, I'm going to go and enter student preview mode. And this is exactly what the student sees. So here we are. The student comes in, sees my menu, sees the welcome announcement, and now they can go and send email, or they can go into the discussion board. So let's go to the discussion board just to make sure, okay? They come in and they say, oh, week 1 Darwin and influence on science. There's one unread post. I better go in there and check it out and see what people are saying. So I go in there and I click on now. Oh, there's one unread post in Darwin and science, and I've set it up here. Hi everyone, Darwin had blah 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 blah. What are your thoughts? And go to pixabay.com, find an image that represents Darwin's contribution to science and post it here. There you go. That's something you could do in your kind of like your opening view of getting the conversation going. So you start with low stakes at the beginning so students practice how to use these tools. And then once they learn how to do it in a week or two, then you can start gearing it up a little bit more as we go along. And you can say, click the reply button if you want to reply. So maybe I do want to go and reply and say, Darwin talked about, something, natural selection, something like that. Okay, and a little bit more thought in there. You can specify guidelines too, like how long should the reply be. Some students will go on forever, say, no more than a paragraph or than a couple of sentences. Some will just do like, yes, I agree. Those aren't, constructive statements. So talk a little bit about what the expectations and the protocol around the discussion should be. So I'll go ahead and submit that as a student. Now you can see that the conversation is growing. This was the opening part. Now we're starting to get some replies to that as we go. Okay. So do test your setup using the student preview mode. At the end, you can exit the student preview mode to seeing that it's working okay. I'll click the exit preview at the top, and then I'm going to keep myself in the class because it becomes really handy later on when you want to perhaps put an assignment in and you want to mark yourself and see what the students are seeing when you give them feedback. So I'm going to keep myself in the course and then click continue. I exit student preview mode, I'm back to where I was. All right, I've talked a long time there, so let me come back. I am going to put back up our presentation and pause for a second so that we can ask some questions. I know you've probably got a lot of questions in there, so let me go and share the screen back again, the presentation, and I'll select where we are at. Okay, give me 1 second. And we will go in and pause for questions. There we go. Alex and Andres, how were the questions? Any questions that came out on this part?
Yes, some did. I'll walk through some of the ones we got listed here. When you're using Collaborate, what was the method you used to stop the mirroring effect?
What I did when I first did it was my mistake, and this happens a lot. I picked the wrong tab to share in my browser. So I just picked this one here. And of course, when you're sharing, it's like looking in a back-to-back mirror situation. That happens a lot. It happens to everybody. Don't worry about it. Just tell your students, I'll stop the sharing, and then I'll go back in and pick the right tab, which I did, and then it becomes a better preview.
Okay. Can you re-show the method by which to add a divider to the course menu?
Certainly. After the questions, I'll make sure that I go back and do that. Let me just make a note of that. Divider. Go ahead and ask a couple more questions, and then I'll start the next session with that point.
Okay. Are students able to start discussion forums, or are all the discussions started by the teacher?
I recommend that the teacher starts the discussion. Set the standard, set the expectation. You go in and you have to create the forums for their discussions. So I recommend you lay them out. And it doesn't have to be every week you have a discussion. It could be maybe the first unit is a discussion, and maybe you have 4 units in the semester. Then you set the parameters, you get everything started. You will have to be present. Remember, going back to those things about teaching presence, social presence. You will have to be present often at the beginning until students get a feel about what the expectations are. So yes, please, as an instructor, you get things started.
Okay. We've had a couple questions here. Can you explicitly show how to access the student preview?
Yep. So there's 2 things: divider and student preview are the 2 things that people want to do. So I think for questions, I just noticed I got a hint to say the questions are okay. I'll go back to the sharing, and we will show those 2 items, and then we'll move on to our next item. And I'll just give you a preview of what the next item is going to be. We're going to talk about content tools. How do we put content into there? Where do I get the content, etc.? And so we're going to talk about some very simple tools. So we're looking at folders, items, web links, learning modules. I won't get to learning modules today, but I just want to mention them to you because you might want to look those up in the Seneca help area. So let me get to that. So I'm going to go back and share and then answer those two other questions. Give me 1 second to get back into my sharing area. And here we go. Okay. Oh, I did it again. No problem. I will fix that. I just got to remember which one I picked last time.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yep.
So we've seen a few participants asking in regards to the mirroring effect that you're getting. The easiest way to explain it is Kevin has two windows open of his Firefox. One which he's using to run the collaborate session, and another one that he's using to show the presentation. So when he starts sharing the browser, he shares the window that has the page with My.Seneca and not the one with Collaborate. That's why you don't see the mirror the second time around. I hope that clarifies that.
Thanks, Andres. Yep. Okay, I think everybody can now see I'm back with my course shell. I think it's working fine. I just checked it there. So the two things were the divider and then the student preview. So let's go over those again quickly. I've got edit mode on at the top here. Just make sure that's always on. It is on. So the divider. So over here in my menu, there was my divider right there. I clicked add the plus sign to add something to the menu. That's what the plus sign means above the menu. And down at the bottom, I'll just scroll slowly, is the divider option. So the divider, I'll put another one in. I'll click a divider. It appears at the bottom of the screen, and then I can drag it to wherever I want. Maybe something right there. So I've just I put a divider between another couple of items in the menu. So that's how the divider works. Student preview mode, again at the very top. Here's my, I'm at the very top where I've got hovering over the edit mode button. I'm going to move over. This icon here is the make your course available or unavailable. If you're perhaps at the very beginning of the semester and you're working on your course, you don't want students to get in just yet, you can turn it off, but then make sure absolutely you make it available by the first day of classes, and that is a minimum requirement of My.Seneca. The one right next to it is the student preview mode. So I just click on that, and when you enter student preview mode, the orange bar across the top, and you can go and peruse just like you would, like a student would, and you see exactly what the student is. You get the student experience. I'm going to exit preview mode again, keep my data. The default is always to delete yourself from the course again. I always want to keep the data because I'm always trying things out as a student in my own course. Okay. All right, so now we're ready to go on to content. I hope that answered your questions. Let's talk about organizing on our course sites. All right, if we go to the menu, we also get by default a couple of other course links. One is course documents. I know what I've done is we forgot to talk about Blackboard Collaborate as a synchronous tool. Let me back up a little bit. Because I know many of you want to talk about Collaborate. So let me stay with communication. Apologize for that. I'm just going to back up a couple of seconds. I want to add synchronous tool, Blackboard Collaborate, because I want to have online office hours for students. Let's say that's the scenario. How do I do that? Okay, edit mode on. I'm going to go over to the far left, and there I'm going to add another tool to my menu. So I'm going to click the tool, and I'm going to call it, in this case, I'm going to call it our online classroom. Just like this room is now, it's an online classroom that, or session area, whatever you want to call it, that we can communicate in real time. By the way, let me do this first. So on the tools type, I want to make sure I pick Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. I do want to mention too that Big Blue Button is another web conferencing tool that does very similar things. You can, if you're experienced with that one and you want to use it, that's perfectly fine as well. We're going to stick with Blackboard Collaborate Ultra because you're experiencing that now too. So I'll pick that, I'll make it available to users, and I'll submit that. It appears at the bottom of the menu. I can then drag it up and I'll put it back in my communication area, which is at the very top of my menu. Now I want to enter that, and that's an easy way for students to get access to it. They don't have to go down to tools to go and find it. It's right here, one click away when they get access to the course. Although you can certainly do it through tools as well. Again, it's up to folks' choice. Let me also mention that perhaps some departments, some programs, some schools have a very specific menu that they want you to follow. Please follow your school's menu design, if that's the template, for students' benefit, because students in similar courses in that program want to see similar menus, so they're not always trying to figure out, where did Kevin put this stuff? Where did Alex put this stuff? That kind of thing. Okay, so let's go to the online classroom. Get together with your colleagues too if you're teaching the same course but multiple sections of a course. Talk to the other instructors to say what are they using for their menu, and organize an appropriate menu structure that fits with your school program recommendations. All right, so we're into the classroom. Every course in My.Seneca does get a online classroom, a course room in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. Here it is. That actually is all you need if you want to do online office hours. You don't need to go and start creating additional sessions for each time you're going to run perhaps an office hour or a lecture or something like that. You can just simply have this room, which is available all the time. Let's take a look at some settings for this room. I go over to the far right, and there's a circle with 3 dots that gives me the session options. I click on it, and here I can join the room. I can edit the settings. I can view reports. So if you run a session and you see you wanted to figure out the end, well, who actually came to that session? You can actually review the report to see who participated in that session. You can get the guest link. If it's enabled, you can grab a guest link and send it to participants that you might want to bring in as guest speakers. So maybe you've got somebody you want to come in and talk to your students about a certain part of your course. You can have them join the synchronous session online. Let's go and edit the sessions, or settings I should say, so that you can see what is listed there. Okay, so here we go. Here's our room. I can join the room. I've enabled guest access. That's how everybody here tonight got access to this room. Here it is. You can copy that link. Everybody who joins is a participant role, although you could change that. If it's a guest speaker, you might give them presenter status. If I scroll down some more, the default role is a participant. Do you want to record, allow downloading of recordings? You can certainly turn that on if you want your students to download the recordings. Okay. A note on recordings. Make sure that you tell your students when you're recording and if you're recording, because of privacy issues. Sometimes if you allow downloading of recordings and people start to share this, some people might put it on YouTube, that sort of thing. Set some parameters and guidelines around if your students can download, what the expectations are. Sometimes you want to download your recording because you talked about a certain part that was very important and people missed the class. Then you want to have students to go and look at it. Well, you might download it to put it into another section or leave it for another class the next semester. Think about those options. The other thing you might want to do with the recording is to put it up on YouTube, and I would recommend unlisted or private if you don't want to share public, if there's student information in the recording, because you want YouTube to close caption it for you to meet AODA requirements, and that's a good strategy. And then lastly on recordings, don't record your whole session. You don't need to. Maybe there's just a 10-minute section in the middle where you're talking about a specific topic or reviewing the assignment that you want students to do. And maybe just record it for that section and then turn recording off again. You don't need to do the whole session. All right, just another couple of sessions. Here's what we did for tonight. We didn't share audio because it was so many participants that we didn't want folks to get a lot of feedback with mics, etc. We're not sharing video. We want to save bandwidth, so we don't want everybody putting on their video channels, but we are enabling the chat messages so you can ask questions along the way. And then, if you are running a session with students, I recommend that you do allow them to draw on the whiteboard, because it's a great place for them to brainstorm, and you can do collaborative interactive sessions through the whiteboard on there. All right, I'm not going to change these sessions. I'm going to come up and just delete that, but I wanted to point that out to you. The other thing is, and I will give it a try now. I know Andres is probably going to go crazy when I do this, but we're going to go give it a try just to show you from the teacher's perspective. I'm going to create a session that is going to start right now with no end to it. One of the things when you create a session, by the way, is that up at the very top, often people miss this section here, which is critical, which is the name of it. And it's going to be my show and tell session to show you what what you actually see when you get into Blackboard Collaborate. I'm just going to keep this going here, and then I'm going to join the session. Let me just see if I'm going to go back, and you can start to see me coming into the session there. It looks like it's working. Yay. So far so good. Alex and Andres, let me know if anything goes wonky as I'm doing it. Okay.
Oh, you're good.
So far is good. So here's what happens when you get into a Collaborate session. You're given the welcome black screen here with the computer, etc. Not much going on. Well, let's look at options. Top left, you can click here. You can then start the recording of a session if you want to look at a recording. I'm not going to turn that on for obvious reasons right now. I'll just leave it off. Where all the action happens is at the bottom right. We've got the purple button with the chevrons that click to give you things that you can do. Okay. The first option is the chat area, which everyone's familiar with because you're using that. I can chat now with everyone, okay, and I can say things like hello, and you're all familiar with chat, and you can say let's all start the conversation. You can look at your participants. So that's the next icon along. Right now there's only me in here. I'm the moderator. But over at the attendee controls over here, I can look at that and see what options I can. If I wasn't a moderator, I had somebody else in here, I could do things like mute their microphone. And that's always a good thing if you've enabled audio, that sort of thing, okay? Over down here, we've got the microphone. I can click on that, then my microphone becomes active. I can share my video. Do I really want to do that right now, tonight? And so you can see me here. I can say share my video, and away it goes, okay? I don't want to do that right now. Turn off my microphone. How did that turn out? Did that work okay? Okay, good stuff.
No issues.
No issues, excellent. So it's working. Next one over is this share content icon. So when I open up a session, I might want to start a poll, okay? So I want to say, how is everybody tonight? So maybe just a, poll, and this is how Alex is doing the polls tonight. How is everyone tonight? Oops. And we're just getting going on here. And you could say your first is great or so-so. You can add additional choices down here, okay? Or something like that. Is something like that. And then start the poll, okay? And it appears here, and then people can click on it and respond. So I'm doing great tonight, I responded, okay? And then if there's participants, this button down at the bottom will allow you to share the responses as you go. So that's the polling feature. I'm gonna turn that off. Share files. So if you've got a PowerPoint or you've got a PDF, those are the two main file types. Images as well. So PowerPoint, PDF files, you can upload them here, and people can see them. So if I added a file here, I can click on it, go to my computer, find a file right here. I can open it. It's a PDF file. It doesn't happen automatically. Good rule of thumb is get in there early, upload all your file types in here. It converts it, then I'm going to share it, and then when I share it, there it is. It's really small on here, but that's a PDF document sharing the assignment for mathematics course that I teach online. And then when you're finished with sharing, you click the circle with the square, and that stops the sharing process. And we're back to where we were before, and I can scroll back and look at other options. I can share a blank whiteboard here, and then I can write on here. Maybe I can pick a color. Maybe I'll go orange and talk about the agenda for today, okay? And then I could say, hey, everybody, let's post our thoughts on here. What does everybody want to know tonight that's critical? What's the burning questions for tonight? You can draw on here. So as you're drawing, you might consider, having people coming onto the freehand drawing on the whiteboard, etc. Now, I won't spend too much more time here. But those are some of the options that you can do. Application sharing is what I'm doing right now. This button right here is I'm sharing my browser tab with you, showing you what I'm doing as I'm going along. So those are some of the key settings for here. This is at the bottom is your raising of hands. If you ask your students to raise their hand to ask a question sometimes, then as somebody raises their hand, you know who's done it. You, as the moderator, you can see who it is, and you can say, oh, Cindy, go ahead. What was the question you were asking? All right, I'm looking at the time. I think we need to come out of here for now. I'm just going to leave the session. So I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to go over to the left, and I'm going to leave that session. And it asks you, how did it go? I'm just going to skip that, and we should be back to our regular session. Okay. Yes, so I think there was a question that popped up as we did that. If you have Word documents, do convert them to PDFs, because Collaborate works with PDFs and PowerPoints. Okay, so let me go back to here. Let me see if everybody can see my screen. There's a question about adding the whiteboard space. That was done through the share option at the bottom, and one of your options is to share a blank whiteboard. And that will then, in other words, if I was to do it here, I would replace what you're seeing my application share with a blank whiteboard. Okay, and we will hopefully have some more sessions along the way with how to use Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. What I do want to say at this stage is that it is a great tool for synchronous communication with students in an online environment, so that can create, again, student to student, student to teacher interactions that can happen from there. Okay, one other thing is that you do have breakout rooms in Collaborate Ultra, so you can send students off in groups, say, okay, you four go and work on this problem, you four go and work on this, we'll come back in 10 minutes and share our solutions, etc. Okay. So there's a question about recordings. Every time you turn the recording on and off, it does actually create an instance of a recording. And as you go back, you can see the recordings. Let me just show that to you now. I'm going to go over to finish off this part. Here I've got, remember our course room. Now I've got the show and tell room that we just went in and showed some things. If I click up here in the menu and recording is turned on, I can click recordings. And then the recordings will start to be listed here from today. This is our recording from the afternoon. If you want to watch a recording, you just simply click on it and click the watch now. I won't do that right now. I don't want to have the system overloaded there for a little bit. So that's just how students would go and view recordings that you have set up. Okay, let's come back. So there we go. That takes care of our communication, synchronous, asynchronous, why we want to include those tools in the online environment, making decisions about whether or not we want to include those in the online environment. All right, Alex, would this be a good time to pause for some questions about Blackboard Collaborate, or are most folks got their questions answered?
We have some questions that we can absolutely go through.
Give me a couple, and then again, at the end, we'll have an opportunity to gather all these questions.
Okay. One, is there a method for Blackboard at least to break students into groups within the sessions?
Yes, there are. So there is, if you're doing, so there's two questions there. One is groups in general throughout the semester, and then groups for just a synchronous session. So in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, there is the breakout rooms where you can put students into groups and have them go off and work on a problem. Within Blackboard, there's also the groups tool. Again, we don't have time for that, but I just want to point out here, users and groups down at the bottom here, you can create groups of all your participants. And in those groups, you can assign them tools from My.Seneca. So you might assign them a Blackboard Collaborate room to go and work on their group project. So that is something that you can do.
Can we get just a quick overview of like the buttons you would click to do that? Just because that's been a question from a few people.
For groups? Okay.
Yeah, for the breakout stuff.
For the breakout session, I'll have to go back into my session. Okay, so the one thing is I only have me in that breakout room, so I can't really put myself in a group. So I'd need to have some additional participants to do that. What I think we'll do for that, just again for the sake of time, is maybe we can come up with a video about how to put people in breakout rooms and post it on the academic continuity site, something like that.
Sure.
And we do have, by the way, for those, is that we do have a groups online module on the teaching and learning site that you can go and show how do I set up groups, random enroll groups, all those kinds of things, and how to use the group tool in My.Seneca. So that's available. I might be able to post that into the chat room here as well. so folks can go and check that out.
Okay. Sorry.
Last question for this one.
We've had a couple show up explicitly where to go to access and download recordings that have been made.
Okay, so I was just showing that here. So let me go back to the online. If I go back to announcements, so let's say we're starting just coming into the course, and I want to access the recordings. So what I do is I go down to the online classroom link in my menu. Okay, it starts the Blackboard Collaborate session going. It's not actually doing a session, it's just getting the interface. I go up to the top where I see these 3 lines, which is the menu icon for this particular sessions. I click on it, and there's the recordings option in the menu. I click that, and it shows the list of the recordings. By the way, recordings don't appear automatically. It does take a little bit of time for recordings to play, so just be patient with it. It might take a half an hour after a session for the recordings to appear. When you're ready to view a recording, you click on it, and you can go and watch it. Okay, let's now go on to our next part, which is the content area. We started that, and I'll just continue. How do we get content in here? Where do I go find content, etc. So for my students. All right, I'm going to go back as if we're coming in fresh into our course. Maybe I've got edit mode off. I've gone away, I've come back the next day, and I want to start adding content now. So I'm going to turn edit mode on, top right corner, making sure we toggle that on. Now I've got these 2 other links in here. By the way, you might have noticed when I turned edit mode off, or I went to student preview, that these 2 menu items did not appear. If you see this icon beside the text, it looks like a square with a dotted border. That means there's no content in there, so they don't show in the menu. So we have to add content to these for them to display in the menu. So these are special menu items. Are called content areas. So let me click on course documents as a content area. When you get in there, then you've got all these extra tabs along the top that you can go and add stuff. Okay, so the ones that we're going to look at is just a couple of the common ones in the build content area. And I'm going to talk about content folders, content items, web links. Those are the main ones that you might want to look at. Okay, so the first I'm going to do is content folder. I'm just going to say, let's start to build a folder, and you want to look at, the kind of, as I mentioned, the chunking of the content over the semester. Recognize that students will come and visit this at various times throughout the week or whenever. So how do we organize? So I'm going to click content folder. As always in Blackboard, you're given a web form, you fill it out. So I'm going to call it, and here we go, I've just got the same setting from before. Maybe you want to say week 1 is our introduction to ABC 100. Notice again, the terminology or the wording you use is very important. Don't just call it week 1. Give some context to the title of that. It does have to be filled out because it's of the orange asterisk beside it. Okay, I'm not going to give it any textual references here. So I think the name is self-explanatory. Again, don't put more in there than is absolutely necessary. I want students to be able to view it. Tracking. I don't track. Tracking, really all it does is say if the student clicked it. It doesn't say whether or not if they read it or did anything with it. So I always keep that off. If you do want to track, you can turn it on to get a sense of the kind of activity if that's important to you. But if you don't need it, don't do it. And it does take up system resources to do that. You can say when the content is available. Sometimes content you might load at the beginning of the semester and you don't want it available until we get to it. So you might want to set some time and date parameters around here. I generally just make my content always available. As I mentioned before, students want to go and view anything that we already did a few weeks ago or want to jump ahead, I have no problem with that. So I don't ever set the date and time restrictions. So I'm going to submit that to upload our week 1 folder. Now I want to go in there and start adding content, things for students to do. Remember, in an online environment, they're always going to ask you, what do I have to do? When do I have to do it? How do you want me to do it? Etc., etc. So we want to put those things in there. Explicit instructions. And as you can see, as the weeks build, we'd have like week 1, week 2, week 3, all the way to the end of the semester. You don't have to do it by weeks. If you have units, unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, whatever, topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, that's totally what makes sense for your course. So let's go into this week 1. Now, as I mentioned, remember back to those literacies at the beginning. And we talked about interaction with the communication. We talked about presences with the communication. The other part in the literacies is how are you getting students to listen and speak? How are you getting them to read and write? How are you getting them to create and produce digital content, these literacies? So when you build content, think about, what do you want them to read? What do you want them to watch? What do you want them to listen to? What do you want them to do, okay, in order to engage with the content? So the first thing I might do is I'll add an item. Maybe I want them to read an article or something. And I always use the item link. I don't use file. File has a couple of nuances to it. Item does everything file does, and perhaps a little bit more, so I always just use the item. It's, again, a personal preference. You might decide to use file as well, but I always like to use the item tool. So I click on it. It gives me a web form like anything in Blackboard. Maybe I'll talk, maybe our introduction to web, we're going to bring our conversation about penguins. I have, Darwin and penguins. If Darwin ever had anything to do with penguins, I think there were penguins on the Galapagos, but we will take a look at, that's what we're going to start our conversation off with. Okay, so I'm just giving it the content information there. I'm going to attach a file. Okay, so maybe what I want to see here is read the article, okay, or whatever file, okay. Read the attached file. And again, this actual instruction is actually probably not good enough. Yes, you want them to read the attached file, but what do you want them to do whilst they're reading? Consider the following questions. Okay, so you might want to say guiding questions. Whoops, I got to be able to spell. So this is, again, some teaching practice that you can think about. And you might want to list them, okay? One, blah, 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 whatever that question is, etc. So as you're building that, then you go to your browse my computer, and I'm going to attach this document, okay? I'll just put any document up there. In this case, it's a PDF. Think about your students too. What do they have wherever they're accessing this from? Do they have access to, they should have access to Office products if they're Seneca students, but if you're putting up a Word document, maybe a student's at home somewhere and doesn't have their regular machine and can't access the Word file. So is there another format? So maybe put two different formats, a PDF and a Word document of the same thing, so that they can make sure that you're not putting barriers up to students. We want to eliminate as many barriers as possible to the content that you're putting up. You want them to engage with it. So I'm going to permit the users to view. I'm not going to track. I'm not going to set display options. One other thing about this, consider where your students are coming from, especially in light of our situation now. We have many international students. Some of them have decided to head on home and continue their studies from home. So if you set a date and time parameter that's Eastern Standard Time, they might be accessing, at home in the middle of the day, which is the middle of the night here. And so you want to make sure that you're cognizant of that. What are the times and dates that you're putting up here, and letting your students know about it? So again, I don't put any of those restrictions, those barriers to content, and then I just submit that. Okay, so the student will now see this Darwin and penguins, and I want them to read. So that's going back to that core traditional literacy, the ability to read and build their reading skills. Now, what else? We want to have UDL, multiple ways of getting access to the content. So reading might be one way. What else? Well, we want them to watch something. So maybe I want to now go in here and build a web link, which will link them to maybe a great video on penguins in the Galapagos. Oh my gosh, I got to spell Galapagos. Hopefully that's close enough. Next, note to self, pick easier things to spell when you're typing in here. Okay, penguins in the Galapagos. So I've got this item. At the very top, I have to put in a name and I have to put in a URL. So I'm going to just jump out to YouTube. YouTube's a great source. If you're using YouTube, make sure about a couple of things. One is, can you use that video? Is it appropriate? Have you vetted it? Have you looked at, is it violating copyright? Has somebody posted it that violates somebody else's copyright? The library has some wonderful resources about how to check for copyright, how to check licensing, how to check if you're able to use it. Take advantage of your library liaisons. Ask them the questions as you're curating content, so that you make sure that you've got the right content. Does it have closed captioning? If we're putting a video in it for AODA requirements, we got to make sure it has closed captioning in there as well. So ask yourself all these questions before you actually post something in there. I think I vetted this one. And it is actually has nothing to do with penguins in the Galapagos, but I just wanted a link to post in there. I could add an attachment and then I could submit that. You don't have to add an attachment. So think about this. Maybe, I need to go in and tell the students what to do with this. Not if just posted the link, it doesn't give them any guidance. No problem. If you've made a mistake, you can always go back in here. I can click the chevron and I can edit that particular content. Okay, so I'm back to the web form where I put in my title and URL, and maybe I want to say now, okay, watch the following video, okay, or watch the video, you know, because it might not be a following video, it might be the video with the link above. Okay, consider, you know, as you vet it, maybe consider the comments at 1 minute 23 seconds. Okay, what do you think? You know, give them something to think about as they're watching this. Not just watch it. Watch it actively, not just passively, so that you're getting them to consume that content. Remember that digital literacy of consuming it in an efficient way. So add your proper grammar, those kinds of things. Okay. And then I'll submit that. I've made a change, and now I've got some direction for the students, not just the link that they should use. Okay, so what I've done now in the building of the content is I've just used a content folder, and I've just added a item, and I've added a web link. I'm going to go test it. Now I've started to build this unit that I want students to use. I'm going to go and click the Enter Student Preview button so I can go and see what the students are seeing. Notice now in my content area, maybe this is what I do often. Above here is the communication tools. In middle, content tools. Stuff at the bottom is what I call administrivia, stuff about the administration of the course, my faculty contact information, how to get access to your grades, which is the #1 reason students come in, to be honest with you, etc. So here's my content area. So I click as a student, content, course documents. I can go into week 1. I can look at this article and download it and read it. I can go and click on here to view the video. So it looks like it's working fine. You might want to test your videos. Okay, this is popping up. I don't know if you can see this, but it's part of my maths course. It's talking about this stuff. So I'll come out of there and go back. Okay, I'll turn that off. Okay, so it's working there, and we're back to our main screen here. I think this is another good time to pause. And before we move on to some more content thingies, I'm going to stop this sharing here. I'm going to go back and share my slide deck here at where we left off, so that we can have an opportunity to pause and ask some questions. Give me 1 second here. Where did we end up with? Right here. And this is, and I wanted to point this out to you, other places to go and get content. Okay, one of the 21st century skills for educators is the ability to curate content. That is to find the best stuff, vet through all the myriad of massive amounts of information, pick the stuff that's really going to help your students learn, really help them achieve those learning outcomes. So where do we go to get content? Well, obviously yourself. You can create content, and we do it all the time. We make PowerPoints, we narrate PowerPoints, and again, in the academic continuity site, there's helpful hints about how to do that. We might create documents, articles. We might do all kinds of videos. We might create small videos that you want to post to students. So yourself is definitely a place to go. But there's also other resources. Okay, yes, the publisher. You might have publishers that have additional resources that you can access, you know, test banks, online interactive elements to the courses if they perhaps come with a book, those kinds of things. Seneca Library, of course, they have a wonderful collection. They have wonderful librarians, liaison librarians that can help you find materials, find readings, find content that would be helpful for your course. But I do also want to look at open content, and that we think about access. You know, just an experience in my own course. I have a publisher book. It's not expensive. They do have online materials, but I'm finding many of my students still do not purchase the book. So what did I do? I went and found an online open textbook that as a supplement to the course that students could use as an alternative. And so they have a choice as to what access materials that they want to use. So where do I go and find that? Seneca has a faculty guide to open educational resources that will show you how to go and find textbooks perhaps that might work for your course, that are free to use, free to download, free to distribute. You can even do remixing of that content, etc., and become part of that open content community. eCampus Ontario has an open library. They also have set up a site that will help you with moving to online learning. They've set up the site that around this whole notion of the impact of COVID-19 and what teachers need to think about when they move their content online. Take a look at that. We will post those links in the chat area. We will make this session available as well so that you can go and look at those resources. Highly recommended. And of course, YouTube. YouTube is a great resource for some video content. And again, just make sure you vet YouTube videos, that you adhere to copyright standards, those kinds of things. And so, as I mentioned earlier, with images, Pixabay and Unsplash are great resources too for free open source imagery that you can then download and use in your courses as well. Okay, so those are some places to go to get content. Okay, I talked a lot more. Let's pause for a second. We're moving along. It looks like I think everything will get done in time, but let me pause now and get your thoughts, questions that you have about content or anything else that we've talked about so far. Okay. Alex, any questions?
Yes, we had a number of people ask about the tracking features, specifically where you can go to actually collect the data from that. So, you know, student views, student interactions, things like that.
Okay, so what I'll do is when I get back into the sharing, I'll go and look at where you can go and find the actual buttons that you press to get the statistics from the tracking.
Okay. We had another question regarding recordings and captions.
Okay, so a couple of things about recordings, is particularly if you're using Blackboard Collaborate. By default, captions are not added. You might notice when you are the moderator that there is an option to give somebody what's called captioning status, so that they can go in and type the captions as you're going. Okay, so maybe you know, the problem is that that's a lot of work for somebody to do specifically. So if you're doing a session like this, having somebody caption this is going to be quite a task. So, but if you're doing a 5-minute segment on something, you could assign one of your students, you know, perhaps, you know, or bring in a colleague through the guest to caption for you for 5 minutes, buy them a coffee or something, or whatever you want to do. Or, you know, sometimes students get practice writing, that kind of thing. It could be an opportunity for them there. Although we don't want to disadvantage students, let me retract that, because if the content is important for the students, you don't want them concentrating on captioning where they should be listening to the content. So perhaps find an alternative for that. Or what you can do is, and this is what we can recommend, is when you do a Blackboard recording, download it later, set the download options, and then upload it into YouTube. Create a YouTube channel for yourself and your class. Use unlisted or private, because if there is private information, student information there, make sure you're not you know, compromising that. Tell your students you're doing it. And then YouTube does have automatic captioning that will help you with the captioning process to get started, and then you can go in and make some tweaks that it might have missed as we go along. So that's an option for getting captioning, but it is very important from an AODA perspective and a UDL perspective to get those captions in there.
Okay. We had, do we have time for one more?
Sure, one more.
Okay, so there have been a couple questions about the use of whiteboards in Ultra and Collaborate. Specifically, like, you know, can you save them? Can you add more? How do you do that? Okay.
Now, the whiteboard feature is, to be honest with you, in Blackboard Collaborate is still very young in terms of its development. So right now you get one slide at a time, one screen at a time. And if you want to save it, It would be there if you turn on recording, you will see it. Or if it's a brainstorming session that you haven't turned on recording, you can do screen capture and just screen capture each whiteboard and maybe post up after the session is done, screen grabs of your brainstorming session with students. And the other thing is you will lose as you open up a new whiteboard and share another whiteboard. It does erase everything, and so that's a really frustrating thing for first-time users of, or any users really, of the whiteboard. You've got all this great content, you forgot to screen grab, and you move to a new whiteboard and everything got erased. So just be cognizant of that.
Okay.
All right. Any other last one, or should we move on?
Sorry, I thought we were finishing that one.
Okay, yeah, that's good. No, we can move on. So there's a good question. I just noticed, does Big Blue Button do a better whiteboard? The answer is yes and no. They both, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra and Big Blue Button, are great tools. Don't get me wrong. They have wonderful collaborative capability. But there are some nuances to each of them. One of the things that Big Blue Button does do that Blackboard Collaborate doesn't do just yet, and that is if you want to share YouTube videos and you want your students to go along with you as you're showing a video, Big Blue Button has an option to display or share YouTube videos. And the students can hear it very well. There's no muffled audio, and you can control how it's going along. So that's one advantage to Big Blue Button. It's not as pretty in terms of the interface and how it goes along, but it does have very similar things. And there are some great tutorials, as Andre is pointing out, about using Big Blue Button and Blackboard Collaborate on the My.Seneca help site. All right, thank you, Alex, for sharing those questions. And we will be capturing the questions, and we will, as I mentioned, posting a recording, maybe a frequently asked question. If your question doesn't get answered, hopefully we'll do it through after we capture and gather all that information. Okay, we don't have access to Adobe Connect through My.Seneca. Our tools are Big Blue Button, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra are the ones that we're recommending. Okay. Let's go on to the next session. So let's look at assessment. I know everybody's interested in assessment. How do we assess, and what do we do there? So what are we going to look at? I want to talk a little bit about assessment and how are we assessing. Think about this in terms of the types of assessment. Remember, UDL talks about multiple ways of learning, multiple ways of expression, representation. Think about multiple assessments. There's three areas of assessment that's used commonly in education: assessment for learning, as learning, and of learning. So one of the things for assessment for learning is, something like a diagnostic. You want to know, where are my students? Where are they, and what level are they at? What do I need to concentrate on in order to get them to those learning outcomes? So you might do something, for example, like post a pre-quiz. Hey everybody, we're going to talk about whole numbers. Let's do a pre-quiz. What does everybody know about whole numbers? Check it out, see how you did, and that will might guide your decisions about what you're going to cover for the next week around that. So that's assessment for learning. Okay, you're seeing where students are at. So how do you incorporate that? The other one is assessment as learning, and you think about this as formative assessment. So it's an ongoing assessment throughout, and yes, it is perhaps marked as well, but it's also as learning. You're using the assessment as a learning aid for those students. So you might do things like, okay, let's write a paragraph, submit it, get some feedback, but then allow multiple attempts so the student can resubmit it, work on it, and fix their writing perhaps, or extend their writing, and get move towards the outcome that you want. So that's kind of working assessment as learning. Discussions, like we talked about earlier, having just weekly discussions and saying, okay, this week we're going to talk about this. Students have to contribute their thoughts, contribute replies to others, and that would be formative assessment as you go along on a week-to-week basis. Then, of course, the one that we're maybe most familiar with is summative assessment. We're going to do the final project. We're going to do the final exam. That's assessment of learning, where it's summative. You're just seeing how did they reach the learning outcomes you intended. And this is really critical, is that the assessment choices that you make must align with your outcomes. Don't put assessments in there just for the sake of assessment. Do they help the students achieve a certain learning outcome in the course? And in your assignments or whatever, specifically tell them, this assessment is designed to help you reach learning outcome X in the course. so that they know, students, and it's relevant for them. That's something called constructive alignment, if anybody's interested in that. So when you're thinking about assessment, think about constructive alignment assessment for, as, and of learning. Okay. What kind of tools? Well, I'm going to talk about the assignments tool, the tests tool. We've already talked about discussion boards. By the way, there is a voice board available in My.Seneca called VoiceThread. Remember we talked about those literacies when you want students to be able to listen and to speak. If you need more of that in your online course, VoiceThread might be one way to do it, because it is a voice. They record their voice and their replies rather than type them textually. It's a bit of a you'll need a little bit of time to work through how to work with VoiceThread effectively, but it's an option that's available there. I don't know if we'll have time to go into wikis, blogs, and journals, but the My.Seneca help area has a lot of help on how to use these tools. And these can be, again, collaborative tools where you want student-to-student interaction. You want student-to-teacher interaction, those kinds of things. Reflective journaling might be something that you want to do. Andres, thank you for posting that link in the chat about where to go get the VoiceThread information. So I'm going to concentrate on assignments and tests, and then we'll stop for questions. And then we'll kind of wrap up the session, and I think we'll be fine. We're at 8:20 right now. Stretch, if you need a stretch break, go ahead and stretch for 2 seconds whilst I load up the sharing again. Refill your beverage, and away we go. So I'm going to go right into the assessment part of the course. And of course, if any questions you have, type them into the chat area. Andres and Alex will be curating those questions. I'll be right with you too when I go and share my screen once again. Maybe I'll pick the right one this time. Okay, I think I've got it. Everybody see that okay? We're left off in our week 1 folder where we've got something to read and something to watch. Okay. Now, generally, what you might want to do is say, okay, I've got them reading something, I got them watching something, now I want them to go and do something. Well, the first thing I got to do now is I'm going to exit out of my preview mode because I was in student preview when I left you last time. Keep the user data and continue. Okay, now I'm going to go into my course documents here and continue with my week 1 folder. So at the end of that reading and watching, I want them to do a little mini low stakes assignment just so that they get in the process of synthesizing what they're learning, and I'm going to do it kind of like a check-in with them. And maybe I'll use it as an assessment as learning so that they use it as a learning tool to figure out where they're going along the way. So at the top of your content area, you have this tab called assessments, and here is test and assignment. So we're going to start with an assignment. I'll start with that one. How do we use the assignment tool for students to submit online? And then of course, then you can grade online, and it saves you handling paper. Obviously in an online environment, that's not something that you have access to. So you can do all the grading, everything, feedback online. So let's go ahead and click the assignment tool. And just like we mentioned before in Blackboard, when you click a tool, you go into a web form, you fill out the web form, and then you click submit. So let's look at it. So maybe I've got, I want to call this the Penguins assignment. Okay, and I'm going to give them instructions about download the assignment instructions in the attached file. Okay, again, spelling properly. Anybody want to help me fix? I always do this. T-H-E instead of, sorry, T-E-H instead of T-H-E. Okay, I got to train my fingers. Okay, download the assignment instructions in the attached file. Okay, and then I'm scrolling down here. Again, coming back, sometimes what I like to do is I like to actually make it bigger for my own eyes because I'm getting older, so I want to have to be able to see it in bigger, and it also helps students too. Again, a UDL consideration. If you want to make, if you make it font a little bit bigger, everybody benefits from that. Okay, then I come down here and browse my computer. I'm going to attach that Penguins assignment file wherever it is. Here it is. Maybe it's a template that they have to fill out and have instructions. Maybe I could have put 2 files. I don't have to just put 1. Maybe I'll put 2. Okay. There it is. All right, so I've attached a couple of files. I could specify a due date. Okay, maybe this is due on the end of the week, maybe next end of April, Friday, and I'm going to specify it to be, oh, let's say 5 o'clock. Again, be cognizant of where your students are at. Some of them might be in around the world somewhere. So what does 5 p.m. mean to them, okay, on this particular day? I have to give it some points. So maybe this will just be a 10-pointer. That has to be filled in here if you're for this assignment because it's got the orange check mark. I could add a rubric. Again, I mentioned rubrics are great tools for speeding up the process of grading. Let's go to submission details. This will be an individual assignment, okay? Maybe I will allow multiple attempts, okay? Maybe I'll give them 2 attempts this time. That way, if they submit it once and it wasn't up to what the expectation, I could send it back to them and say, please submit again, and here's my comment on that, okay? Again, it's up to you. How do you want to grade that? I'll do it the last graded attempt. And now I do want to check it for plagiarism. So I have access to the SafeAssign tool, plagiarism tool. I want to check that for plagiarism so that they're not copying another assignment if it was previously submitted, etc. I do want to allow the students to view their SafeAssign originality reports because I want them to learn from the experience. You know, what does the report look like? What does it flag? Those types of things, okay? There is another option here to exclude submissions to the Institutional Global Reference Database. If you do select that, the assignment still will be checked against it, but it won't be added to the database as well. So it's something to consider when you're thinking about using plagiarism checking in your assignments. I'll turn it off again because I want to show you something from the student perspective in a second. Grading options. You can allow anonymous grading or delegated grading. Generally, we don't do delegated grading here at Seneca, so anonymous grading may be something where the student name is taken away, so when you're grading, you're just seeing the grade and you don't know who's you're grading, so that might impact your grading strategy perhaps as an attempt to remove bias. So let's go and look at display of grades. So this is how this grades will appear to students. Primary display. Right now it's a score, so that's going to show it was out of 10. So if I put 8 out of 10, it's going to show 8. You might want it to be percentage. That is what students will see. I know there is a secondary display option here, but students do not see secondary display. Only you as an instructor will see secondary display. Do you want to include it in the grade center calculations? Of course. Do you want to show to students? Absolutely. Part of My.Seneca minimum requirements is that we want students to see their grades as they're going along. Do you want to show them their average and median and how they're doing against their peers? Some people like to do that, some people don't. I'll pick, sure, why not? I'm going to make this assignment available. I'm not going to limit the availability. Again, you might decide I'm putting in this assignment early. It's not till week 10 or week 7, so I'm not going to make it available until week 6, something like that. I don't know. Those kinds of decisions you can decide on from there. And track number of views. Oh, I just remembered I got to go show you how to track the views. Okay, so let me turn that on for this particular assignment to show you that. Okay, then I'm going to submit. All right, so now we have, again, they're going to read this, they're going to watch this, and then they're going to do this Penguins assignment. Okay, now I want to make sure what this looks like from a student perspective. So we need to test this just to make sure what you expect the students to do is exactly what they see. Okay, so your instructions can be clear. So let's go in enter student preview mode and do the assignment as a student. Here's one piece of advice I always give everybody. Don't give your students something to do that you haven't done yourself already. So if you're giving them some kind of assignment task, like create a video, for example, make sure you go and create a video first so that you know the time it takes to do it, what all the nuances around that particular assignment. Okay, so I'm in student preview. Let's go and look at, I'm in the course documents. I'm going to go to my week 1. I'm going to read this. I'm going to watch that. Now I'm going to do the assignment. I'm going to look at the template and download it. I'm going to get the instructions from here and then start working on the assignment. So imagine I've done that. I'm now ready to submit. So I click on the Penguins assignment. Okay, here it is. It's 10 points. It's due on the 3rd. I'm really a tentative student. I'm going to submit it early. It tells me here, by submitting some paper, you agree to have it checked against using the Safe Assign services. Okay, so I'm going to have that done. So I come down here, and then I'm going to, by the way, Safe Assign does check a number of formats. Okay, so Word documents, etc., can all be checked by Safe Assign. So I'm going to browse my computer. Okay, here's, oh, hang on a second. Oh, no, it's okay. I'll do it in here. I'm going to submit my, here I am, my super student assignment. I'm going to submit that. Okay. Down here, Safe Assign accepts all these file types. So there's lots of options here for it to check. Remember, I didn't check that thing that said it's going to be excluded from the reference database. So now the students have to agree that their submission will be included in the global reference database. They have to click this because it's going to go into, it's their original work that's going to go in, hopefully it's the original work, that's going to go into the database so other things can be checked against it. Okay, I think I've done that. I've attached the file. I'm going to submit it. I could make, student could add comments to you, something that they might want you to check out or something there, so they get a comment as well. So I'm just going to leave that blank and submit. Takes a couple of seconds, and so here we go. The submission comes. There is the online grading system. It knows that here's the assignment, okay, that students have done. They can see what the assignment is. They will get an email saying you've submitted the assignment on this date, so it was in the parameters of when you had the due date, all that kind of stuff. Notice that the report for Safe Assign is in progress, okay? And there's no grade assigned yet, obviously, because this instructor hasn't got a chance to look at it. But Safe Assign reports don't happen right away. They do take some time. So you can tell the students your report won't be there initially. Go back and check it in a day or two, or a few hours later. Okay. If they notice, I get multiple attempts on this assignment, so I could, as a student, start the next attempt. Maybe this is, I forgot, I put the wrong file in there. Oh dear. So what you can do is start new and go from there. Okay. So it's working from the student perspective. I can see how I would have the students submit the assignment. Now let's look. What does the faculty members see for this assignment? I'm going to exit the preview, keep the data. Again, that's critical here for testing purposes, and continue. Okay, so now I'm back as the instructor. Okay, I've got some submissions of assignments coming in. Where do I go and check them and grade them? All right, I scroll down below the menu, and down here I have access to my grade center. And when I click on and expand the grade center, I can see needs grading. So let's go and check what needs to be graded. Okay, well, remember we set up that discussion for myself. I can go and grade that because I think we gave it a couple of points that I can go and check that. But here's the assignment, Penguin's assignment. So let me go and grade that one. Let's click on it. And it gives a very similar interface to what the student sees, but you as the instructor have a lot more tools. Here's the assignment. So you can comment directly in line, okay? So maybe you might want to highlight something that they wrote, okay? So you can click on this and highlight certain parts, and you can select the highlight tool. And you can comment, okay? Please check grammar, something like that. I don't know if there's any grammar errors there, but common things that you want to do. So there's a comment attached to that, okay? Then you can freehand draw, okay? I can go up here and select the pencil tool, okay? And then I could say, oh, look at this right here, okay? I can say in something there and say save that. And I can then, when I'm done with that, I might want to highlight it in freehand and then add a comment to that to say something like scientific names, second name shouldn't be capitalized, like so. Okay, and I'm going to post that. So I'm adding these comments so the students can see this little icon for comments. Students can come in and see it. Now I want to give them their grade. I come up here and I can grade the attempt, okay? I can put the grade in there. When I click this area, it does expand the feedback to learner area, and I can talk about, give them feedback, check, things to check, check scientific notation, syntax, something like that. The other things, check the comments in line, check inline comments. Something like that. And obviously you'd spend some more time in here crafting your feedback to the student. You can, if you want, attach a file there as a kind of a feedback file. You could then go and grade it. Okay, so I say, okay, this is 8.5 out of 10, maybe based on my criteria that I've set up for grading, which you should also tell students. A great way to do that is make the rubric available to students so they can see how are they going to be graded on this for content, for grammar, for whatever. Okay, I'm ready to submit that now. By the way, I'm going to close off my commenting and things over here and submit that. And now it's no longer in needs grading. The only thing I have left to do is grade my discussion post, which I'll do later. Okay, and that will then appear for the student. So what does the student see after you've graded it? Well, let's go back and look as a student. And I'm going to go into my grades as a student. And there is my Penguins assignment. I got 85%, 8.5. Notice it gave me the percentage, the primary display that I set up, okay? And I asked for the average and the median. Well, I'm right there on the average because I'm the only one that's done it so far, but there you go. This icon here means it needs grading and it hasn't been graded yet, so the students can see that you haven't gotten to that part yet as well. Then I can click on here to get comments. Those are the comments that were available in there as well. I can as well, if I wanted to, go in here and view the comments that the instructor said. So I can go in here to my Penguins assignment, okay, and I can come in here as a student, and there you see it. There's the highlights, the comments. I can click on them and see what did my teacher tell me I should do in terms of feedback. Okay, I'm going to exit that preview from there, but that's how you can do online assignment submission, online grading, and how the students can do it through the My.Seneca environment. Okay, lastly, I want to show you the testing tool because I know that many of you are looking at the testing tool and want to incorporate it, okay? By the way, I do want to mention over here, we do have an assignments menu item in a common menu. And you may, and I think you should, copy your assignments into the assignments tool so the students know what are all the assessments in the class, so that's all in one place from there. Okay, so you can do that. I can go into course documents. I can go into my week 1 folder, okay, and I can look at these items here, and I might decide I want to move it here into the assignments folder so that students have all the assignments together, and maybe put a placeholder in here that says, read this, watch this, go and do the assignment. You'll find the link in the assignments folder, okay, rather than posting the assignment directly in here. Again, it's up to you how you want to look at that, just some things to consider in terms of organization of your online materials. Okay, let's go and look at a test, okay? So maybe I will have them go, let's do it this way now. So maybe I'll go to the assignments area and I'm gonna add all the tests in here. Okay, so I'm going to click on here in the assessments. I'm in the assignments area. I'm going to go to assessments and I'm going to create a test. So, and maybe I want this test to be another test form of, maybe it could be a summative test. It could be more assessment as learning. And you want them to learn from this test, that kind of thing. So I've already created a couple of tests here from the sessions today, but let's go from the beginning. How do we create a test? How do we set it up, and how do we deploy a test? I'm going to do, again, like anything in Blackboard for some of these interactive elements, it's a 2-step process. You create the test and then you deploy the test. So it's 2 things at once there. So let's start with the creation process. Again, I've gone up to the assessment. I've picked the test option. Now I'm going to create a test. Again, a web form appears. You give it a name, okay? So I'll call it practice test, okay? One of the things that you can do is set up a practice test. And this way you can say, hey, everybody, go in and try the practice test. Keep it wide open. You can try it as many times as you want. All I want you to do is go and look at the questions so you know the types of questions I will ask you in a more formal test, and you'll know how to answer them. So you want students to be able to answer the content, not figure out how to answer the content. So practice tests are great for that. Okay, I could give them instructions. You know, I could say this test is designed to help you figure out how to do testing online if they've never done it before. all those kinds of things. I'll leave it blank for now, just so for the sake of time, because I know time is marching on. So I've got that. I'm going to click the submit button. Now I'm in the test canvas area where I can create the questions. You can upload questions. There are a lot of tools out there that allow you to upload questions. Excel spreadsheets for simple questions can be used. Respondus, which I'm sure some of you will be asking about, can be used to upload from Word documents. I'm just going to go from scratch and just show you the process from here. So I'm going to go directly to create a question. There are tons of question types. I would concentrate on some main ones. For example, multiple choice. Use those. True, false, short answer, essay type questions. Those are the ones that you, from an accessibility point of view, they're tried, trusted, and true. Screen readers can access to those, etc. Some of the more complicated things like hotspot things where images are involved might not be as accessible as you think. Okay, if you're doing math, calculated numeric or calculated formula, or physics or something, those two are really helpful and handy as well. But I'm going to concentrate on the basic ones. So let's go and create a multiple choice question. So I click on it, it gives me the form. Let's create this question. So question title doesn't have anything to do with the actual question. It just gives it a category, just a name to attach to the question, a number. So I'm just going to call it Q1. It could be anything. Students don't see it. Question text now would be what you're going to ask. Okay, so this is a multiple choice question. So maybe we're again talking about Darwin here. So I'm going to add this. Darwin contributed many ideas to science, except. Okay, so I'm going to bump it up so it's bigger. And then so that's my stem of my multiple choice question. Okay, now I'm going to look at the options for students to select from. Answer numbering. I could use Arabic numerals, Roman numerals, etc., uppercase, lowercase. I tend to just say none. You will get a radio button that you can select from. So adding extra extraneous stuff. Remember I talked about don't put anything redundant in there. I just leave it as none. Vertical or horizontal. Do you want to have columns for selections or rows? So what do you want to do? I always go vertical for the most part. Again, it could be personal preference. Again, the other thing, think about cell phones. If students doing this test on a cell phone or a smartphone, vertical is better because if you have horizontal, scrolling issues can really get in the way. So be careful about that. Okay, show answers in random order. Sure. Be careful though. If you have questions like A and B are correct or all of the above are right or something like that, don't use this option because that will jumble up the A's and B's and C's, and what you thought was A and B won't necessarily be there. Okay, so let's go and look at the options. I'm going to have 4 options available. Maybe the first one is he did everything except the theory of evolution, perhaps. Oops, I got to be able to spell. Okay, now that is not the correct answer. He did contribute that. Okay. But I'll leave the fact that it always assumes the first one is correct for now. You don't have to put the first one to be the correct one, okay? I can change that later. Make sure you do though, if you get into there. So maybe he also contributed to natural selection as another option. His contribution to science, I'll bump that up to be 14 point as well. Maybe he did adaptability of species. Oops. From there, and the other thing, maybe he talked about survival of the fittest. Okay, survival, there we go. Bumping it up to 14 point font. Okay, that is actually the right answer, so I'm going to change the correct answer to option number 4 down here. Okay, so Darwin did all those other great things, but he didn't actually coin the term survival of the fittest. Okay, so then feedback. Now, if you're using this for, again, assessment as learning, you want to give the feedback. So if they get it right, you can, well done. You're on your way, that you're learning it. But the incorrect feedback is most important. If they got it wrong, how do you direct them to the right answer? You could say, Darwin didn't actually coin that term. Whoops. review chapter 6 or week 3 stuff, or whatever you want to say in there. Probably be a little bit more, again, do a little bit more thinking around what the feedback you want to give. Okay, we're not going to worry about any of the other things here. I'm just going to submit that, and we've got our first question, first multiple choice question in there. Okay, with the feedback, etc. Now over on the right hand side, it shows points. Is that worth 10 points? By default, our Blackboard environment gives 10 points to every question. Maybe, it's really worth 2 points. So I click on here, change this setting here for it to be 2 points and submit that. Now it's going to be 2 points instead of 10. All right, now I'm just going to quickly go in there. I hear that the chat area is bumping along. Alex and Andres, if there's any burning questions before I continue, just jump in at any time and pause and stop me for a second. But I will continue. Go ahead.
Did you want to do a couple questions? Sorry.
Are there any that are just showstoppers at the moment, or can we wait a couple more minutes?
Oh no, we can wait a couple minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just go and finish this, and then we can pause for questions and answer that. So just wanted to get the segment in there. So the next one here is I'm going to create a true/false question. So I go create a question, true/false. Question 2. Now I do want to mention too, I know some of you are thinking, well, if I spend all this time putting these questions, can I reuse them? Yes, absolutely you can. Can I post them and move them to other sections of Blackboard? Yes, you can, and I can show you that. Can I move them to another semester? Yes, you can. And there's some tips that we can show you again around that. So I'm going to go question 2, my true/false question, and I'm going to say, the algebraic expression. Obviously, you can see this has nothing to do with like studies here, but I'm just putting different examples in here. The algebraic expression 7 less than a number is, or I should say that the algebraic expression 4, hang on, click 4, 7 less than a number is. Okay, now for those of you doing math types questions, there is a math editor in here, okay, that you can use. It's this icon right here, which is the function X icon, launch math editor right there. And I know you can't see this because it's opening up a new dialog box, but you can use it, and I recommend that you do use it for things so there's no confusion around what the math symbols are. So here we go, you can see there it's put in 7 minus x, okay? Now I'm asking this question, is it true or false? Another word on this is, if you want students to input mathematical content in a test, they do, the math editor is recommended, but students need time to learn how to use it. So that's why a practice test is really good for that, or better, don't have them use it. You write the multiple choice questions and you take the time to input the symbols in there so that students don't have to. They can select from different options. All right, I'm going to make it vertical again. The answer to this is actually false, so I just have to select false. The feedback again would be something like well done here, and maybe in the incorrect response I can put in something like review chapter 4. Think about less than and more than. Okay, so in this case, students always have difficulty. What does it mean? What does less than and more than mean in terms of order? So I'm good there. I'll click submit. Okay, and I've got another question in there. Okay, so I've got my true false and my multiple choice question. One more question and then we'll move on to deploying. So this is just the creation phase. This is getting the test in. The other thing I should have noticed 10 points again. I don't think it's worth 10 points if the first one's worth 2, so I can come in here and change that to 2 points and submit that. Be careful about that. Sometimes people forget about changing the point value, and then you got some questions worth way more than others in the test. So just be careful about that as you're building these. Okay, I'm going to create finally a short answer question. Okay, and I'll call it Q3. And the question might be, according to the World Health Organization, let me see if I've got that in there. Nope, I don't have I'll have to type it myself. According to the World Health Organization. Okay, you can prevent the spread of COVID-19 in a number of ways. Discuss these or describe these ways. Okay, I could again probably spend some describe, what you think are the most important measures, preventative measures. So you do have to think about the wording of your question, just like you would in any test. Preventative measures. Okay, delete that out. Okay, I might have to do some editing. World Health Organization, bump it up again. I always like going bigger. And then you have options here around how many rows to display. I'll just go to the max so that they have, 6. In the short answer, it's 6 rows maximum that they can respond to. And the other, you'll notice here that they can respond with text, those kinds of things. There's some editing tools in here as well that they can use. Add a rubric if I want to. I'm not going to here, and just submit that in there. Okay, now don't forget I've got to change the point value. This one might be worth more points than 2, but maybe not 10. I'll make it 5, something like that. Okay, I got my test. It's not very big, but it's just, you can imagine you've got 3 questions, 9 points. We're raring to go. So I've got the test created. Now what do I do? Well, I'm going to come down here and click OK. Obviously, you would add more questions as you go. So I've created the test. Here it is. My practice test appears in my list of tests. It can stay there, and you might decide this is the practice test for week 3. So I'm not going to do anything with it yet. But when it's ready to be deployed, here's what you do. You come in here and in our case, I'm creating and submitting at the same time. So I click submit, and now we set the test options. So it's our practice test. Do we want to open the test in a new window? I'm going to say no. Blackboard navigation can get tricky. So what you want to do, I recommend don't open tests in new windows. Keep it in the same window. Do you want to make it available to students? Sure, let's make it available. Do you want to send an announcement out to students? Say, hey, the test is up. Go ahead and try it. Okay, you can do that. Multiple attempts. Sure, this was going to be a assessment as learning. I want them to learn from this assessment. So I'm going to give them unlimited attempts to try it. Go and try it as much as you want. And I'll just keep, the highest grade that they did and all of that. I am going to force completion. I want them to do it in one sitting. They've got 20 minutes to do it in, say, for this one, 3-question quiz. I'm going to auto submit after 20. So if 20 minutes comes up, it automatically gets submitted. When I can set the display parameters, okay, when is it going to be available for a certain window of time? I'll leave it open for now. Don't set a password for these. Remember when I talked about barriers, don't put any undue barriers to students for these kinds of things. So don't set a password. This is very important. Test availability exceptions. So maybe I've got a student that needs extra time on a quiz. How do I give them extra time when everybody else gets the 20 minutes? Well, I can click here and add a user or group. Now you won't see this, but I'll pick myself from my student list, and you'll see it in a second. So here I am. I'm a student that's going to have an exception. So right now the timer's 20 minutes, and I get time and a half, so I'm going to bump that up to 30 minutes. So myself as a preview, I get 30 minutes instead of everybody else getting 20. Okay. The other thing I can do is I can go in earlier, and perhaps, so maybe this is a good way, by the way, to test your test before you deploy it, is that you can say make yourself a user in your course, set the availability for like a week or right away for just yourself, and then you can go in and preview it when everybody else can't. So that's a good thing to do there. Okay, I can set a due date. I might want to do that. Remember, I'll set it here to be April 3rd, and I'll show you why in a second. Again, cognizant of time, where in the world are my students coming from, what does 5 p.m. mean to them, okay? Do you want to, don't allow them to, if the due date is passed, you might make that distinction because you might have given everybody the answers and you don't want somebody going and doing it after all the answers are provided. So maybe, yeah, okay. Include the test in the grade center calculations, sure. Now, how do you want to display the results? Okay, so I want students to learn from this. So right after submission, go ahead, give them the score, give them all the answers, give them the correct, give them what's been submitted, give them the feedback, show the incorrect answers. Going to give the whole shoot and match here, okay, in there so they can see everything. I might decide after the due date to give all that. Okay, that's why I set a due date, so you have the option to do that. You can set a couple of parameters. I could choose another one, this one and this one, okay? So right now, whenever they submit, they're gonna get the whole amount. Test presentation, it's gonna be all at once, okay? I tend to do that for quizzes, just like a test that you would have in class. Students can get the paper, they can read all the questions, they can read through it first before they start, they can go back and forth. So I'm just gonna give it all at once. Now, if I did do it one at a time, you can also set a prohibit backtracking. Again, I don't like to do that because a student might be on the third question and go, oh yeah, I know what I was supposed to do in question number one. And if they can't go back, then they can't correct it, okay? So again, I'm not gonna prohibit backtracking. I'm gonna give it all at once. I might randomize the questions, sure. So every student gets a different order of the questions, why not? And away we go. Then I'm gonna submit it. So the quiz is now ready to go. So let me go again. I know we're approaching time. I'm just going to do it as a student, the quiz, what it looks like, so you can see that perspective. And then I'll stop and pause for questions and we'll wrap up the session for tonight. All right, here we go. I'm going to enter student preview mode. All right, I'm going to go and find it in assignments. As a student, there's the practice test. It's setting up here. It says I got 30 minutes for me because it knew I needed the time, a little bit more time. It gives me all those options. It gives you multiple attempts. It's due on this date. When you press begin, you're into the test. So I click on it. I'm ready to do the test. Okay. The timer starts clicking down from 30 minutes for me. And here's my questions. Okay. So they randomize it. So they put the first question, the third question I put in there, and the first question. So here I am entering World Health Organization, and I can say the preventative measures that I feel are most important are blah 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 blah. Okay, and then you're writing the test. Then I say, okay, and the algebraic expression for 7 less than number is this. Well, that's false. It should be the other way around, x minus 7. Okay, so I got that right answer, I think. Darwin contributed many ideas to science except, so here, as I mentioned, the radio buttons are here. So maybe I pick natural selection, okay? Well, no, you know what? I know this one, survival of the fittest. Well, let's see what the wrong answer data gives us, okay, from here. All right, just as an alternative. Okay, I'm ready, I've done the test, I think I'm good. I'll save and submit. And it does say confirm. Yep, I'm gonna confirm. And here we go, test is saved and submitted. Here's the start, here's where it started, submitted, the due date, how long it took. Press OK to view the results. Now tell your students about this because sometimes on certain screens they don't know that there's this OK button down here. Okay, so tell them about that. It often happens in Blackboard, there's always this OK button. So when I click it, here's what the student would see. I open it up so they can look at it, okay? This one is the asterisk, the exclamation point, because I will need to go as an instructor in here and mark this. So if I haven't marked it yet, the student's not gonna see what the feedback is because it's just their response that they gave us. But this one's marked, it's correct, okay? The response feedback is well done. Good, I got that one. I got this one wrong. I said natural selection, the right answer was survival of the fittest. Here's the feedback. Darwin didn't actually coin that term, review chapter 6. Okay, so I've got the feedback from that. I can go back and do it again if I want to because I've allowed multiple attempts. So I can click on that and try it again and correct myself and work through it. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna keep my user data as I mentioned, come back to here. I'm gonna zip over to our, share the presentation, and then great time to stop and talk about, I'll get to the questions in a second, okay? But I do want to point out, if we don't have time for this, the resources. So we will have questions. Give me 1 second. Academic Continuity website, great website that has a lot of resources and helpful tips about all the things we talked about: communication with students, assessment, content. My.Seneca help site. All the tools in My.Seneca have extensive help in there about how do I do this? How do I put in a test? How do I transfer content? How do I do all those things that we've talked about? Teaching and Learning Center website as well has a lot of online modules about groups, Safe Assign, Grade Center, all those kinds of things that you can work through those online modules. Andres, I believe, has been posting those in the chat, or Will, I think, just did. So you'll have that. Again, this will be posted. Also, where can I go? If you need assessment, if you need help on any of this, request for support form. Blackboard training, send to BB support at Seneca College. IT support, we do have our request for support form as well. Andres can put the link in there, or Alex can put the link in there. So there's lots of help there available for you. Let me go back and then pause for questions. Alex, what questions came up in the chat there?
All right, so we had a number of course, about tests and assignments and such. What are the best resources with regards to academic integrity and online testing?
Okay, we do have in our academic integrity site some suggestions for maintaining academic integrity with online tests. So there are some guidelines there around some things you can do, and I went over some of them, like randomizing order of questions, creating thinking questions, not just those kind of fact-based questions. So facts. Think about Bloom's taxonomy. What level are you trying to assess? So if a synthesis, analysis. You also, by the way, you also have to think about, are these degree students, diploma students? What level are you trying to assess? So think about the questions that you're giving them. And think about using a lot of assessments rather than few summative assessments, okay? Now, some of your programs, I know you have guidelines about how many assessments you're supposed to do with your program. What are the requirements around certification? Absolutely, you've got those as well. So there's different kinds of guidelines to follow based on that. So think about those things. There are, long story short, check the academic continuity site. We do have some things around things that can help with academic integrity in terms of testing, etc. Maybe you don't need a test. Maybe you could do a final project, final assignment, and you can reach those outcomes without having to actually do a written online test at a certain place and time.
Okay.
Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Yep. When students are submitting assignments that have been created or anything like that, assuming the due date hasn't been passed, are they able to add to their submission, add more files and the like?
If you've set multiple attempts, okay. So if you only have a single attempt and they've submitted, then that's their submission. Now you can go in and clear an attempt and let the student resubmit. Absolutely, you have that power in the Grade Center. Absolutely, but think about that. Like, you can tell your students, well, if you want them to submit early and then submit again, maybe you want to allow two attempts or 3 attempts for a particular assignment. By the way, I'm just going to, whilst I know Alex has got a lot of questions, I know we're up to 9:02. We're 2 minutes over. If you do want to go, absolutely no problem. Head out, and I'll just say thank you so much for coming tonight and participating. I hope it was useful. We're going to do a poll. Maybe we could do that quickly before we get back to questions. I will stick around and answer questions, but I do want to just get Alex to, if you have time, Alex, to wrap up with that poll so that we can close off with that. And if you need to go. I will stick around for another 5 minutes or so to answer those questions.
Will be coming in like 5 seconds.
Poll in 5 seconds. Excellent. Thank you, Alex. Okay, so here's our final poll then. How do you feel about about teaching effectively online using My.Seneca now? Are you ready? Are you ready but need more help, or still not ready yet, etc.? Go ahead and answer the poll, and we'll show the results in a second. And as I mentioned, I will hang around and answer a couple more questions for another few minutes if you want to stick around. If not, thank you very much for coming. The recording will be available on the Academic Continuity site, and you can check it at a later time. And we will be collating the questions in the chat area and hopefully coming up with a frequently asked question document for that. So if I didn't get to your question, hopefully I'll get to it later on. Okay, just a couple more. We got a few more responses there. Okay, go ahead, Alex. You can reveal, I think, at this stage. Good. Okay, so here we go. We've got some of you are ready to go. Some of you, most of you are ready, but need more help. Understandably, absolutely. This takes some time, you know, in terms of teaching online and getting comfortable with it. Some of you are still not ready. That's very honest. No problem as well. The help is there. Teaching and learning site, academic continuity, etc. So you're not alone. Don't feel that you're not alone. The help is there. Please reach out. Okay. You can clear that poll now. Alex, thank you so much. I do want to thank Andres and Alex for co-moderating with me tonight and doing all that work behind the scenes to gather your questions. Can we give a round of applause in the chat area for Andres and Alex? Thank you very much for that. I want to thank everybody for coming and participating. And as I say, Alex, whenever you're ready, go fire away. I've got a couple more questions.
Okay, let me just pull them up here. Oh man, okay, we got a whole bunch. Where are they here? Sorry, this happens
No
at the end
worries.
when everyone adds their stuff.
Yeah.
With regards to you know, assignments and tests and how you can have different points and stuff, is there any specific way other than just inspection to make sure that everything adds up to 100?
First off, you don't have to have things adding up to 100. You know, if a test works out to be out of 53 points, that's fine. Okay, and if it's graded by Blackboard, if there's no manual grading involved, Blackboard will figure out the right score out of 53 to give it as a percentage. If you prefer to have things out of 100, then yeah, just think about design your assessment first in Word. Write it out like you would a normal assessment, and then figure out how many marks each is worth. Then when you're ready, then you can input the test questions into Blackboard and set the appropriate marks.
Okay. Do we have anything else in our schedule coming up with more webinars?
Yes, there will be every Friday. Academic Continuity and Teaching and Learning are running a Friday webinar series that looks at some various aspects. There's one coming up this Friday. Look for that. I think we're also planning, I know I don't want to, Andres is probably going to kill me, but I think we're planning things like more Blackboard Collaborate and more Respondus type things. Is that right, Andres?
We're looking into it. Yeah, I'm hoping to do a bit more in depth into Respondus and Collaborate, since I'm seeing a lot of requests for that.
Okay, sorry, Andres, to have you jump in there, but yeah, I think we'll, as needed, send your requests to this request form, and then we'll know which ones to do if they're helpful for you. Okay, so look for the Friday series, webinar series, posted on the Academic Continuity site. Alex, last question, perhaps?
I'm trying to scroll back because the scroll up goes so far now. Oh well, I guess we'll just take the last one here. Yeah. How do you access information on leading live streams through Blackboard? Maybe the person who asked the live stream, are they talking about YouTube videos, or are they talking about streaming this elsewhere? I'm not. So if it's live stream YouTube videos, you might want to do things like get the link for the YouTube video and post it in the chat. So you might have noticed any link you put in the chat is an active live link that students can click on. It's much better for them to download it on their own machines rather than trying to push it through this system here as a kind of a live stream. So just tell them, go and click on it, watch the first 30 seconds, come back and we'll chat about what you just talked about. Hopefully that answered the question. I think clarification was how to give a lecture live, which is basically what we're doing now.
Okay, yeah. So that is, again, very important. And maybe I think we did talk in our meetings about a session on how to do online lesson online. I hate to use the word lectures, online synchronous sessions as an instructor. So I think we're going to have something like that as a in the intercession between semesters to show folks how to do that. Look, stay tuned. We'll get to that. All right, Alex, thank you.
Okay. Yep.
All right, on that note, again, it's 9 after. Thank you so much for coming. And again, look for some more information on the academic continuity site and the My.Seneca help pages. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Andres. Thank you, ITS. Thank you, Teaching and Learning. And we'll say goodnight and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye for now. Alex, you can, sorry, Andres, you can turn off the recording now, I believe.